Act 2, Scene 3, the entrance to Macbeth's castle. So the first person we're introduced to here is the porter. Now, the porter takes on the role of comedian and he provides necessary comic relief. Comic relief was something that would have been used frequently on the stage at this time, and particularly in Shakespeare. You see it with the nurse, her character in Romeo and Juliet, when things have gone very, very dark. Somebody has to bring up a little bit of comedy to kind of like lighten the mood. And we've just seen in the last scene a heinous and horrendous murder. So the porter kind of is like in a way designed to offset this. He's been drinking throughout the night with the other servants because the king, when he visited, made great provisions for all servants. So they've had a great all night. And this knocking is coming at the door and he's kind of stumbling drunkenly across the stage going to answer the door. So this is his first speak. Here's a knocking indeed. If a man were porter to Hellgate, he should have an old turning of the key. So he references there his being like a porter of hell. And it is important because, of course, hell is actually going to break loose. It's ensuing now in Scotland because the connection between the godly king and his maker has been severed. So actually some hellish things are about to unfold. Knocking. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there in the name of Beelzebub? There's a farmer that hanged himself on the expectation of plenty. Come in time. Have napkins enough about you. Here, you'll sweat for it. Another knock. Knock, knock. Who's there in the older devil's name? Faith, here's an equivocator that could swear in both the scales against either scale, who committed treason enough for God's sake and yet could not equivocate to heaven. Oh, come in, equivocator. So he's invoking heaven and also hell, and he's talking in tongues, and he's stumbling while he does it, and he's sort of providing that very necessary moment of kind of comedy that is needed in a tragedy such as this. More knocking. Knock, knock, knock. Who's there? Faith, here's an English tailor, come hither for stealing out of a French hose, so he's not without his seediness. Come in, tailor, here, you may roast your goose. And more knocking. Knock, knock. Never a quiet. What are you? But this place is too cold for hell. I'll devil porter it no further. I had thought to have let in some of all professions and then go the primrose way to the everlasting bonfire. So plenty of references there to hell again. The reference to the primrose way, which you hear in Hamlet as well, and going to the everlasting bonfire. So reference to hell. Knocking. And on, I pray you, remember the porter. And he opens the door finally. So we've been hearing this knocking for a while and it's gathering momentum. Who's at the door? So at the door is Macduff and Lennox. Lennox is almost always attending to the king in some which way. And Macduff here, a very, very important character. And he has been given the job of waking the king to bring him on to his next place. The king would have traditionally been going on for hunting or going back to his castle or whatever, but part of his retinue would have been, sent to wake him. So that was Macduff and his role. Macduff. Was it so late, friend, ere you went to bed, that you do lie so late? So he's kind of slagging off the porter, like, what took you so long to open the door? The porter says, faith, sir, we were carousing to the second cock, and drink, sir, is a great provoker of three things. So again, with the comic relief. Macduff, well, what are these three things? Does drink especially provoke? Marry, sir, nose painting, sleep, and urine. Lechery, sir, it provokes and unprovokes. It provokes the desire, but it takes away the performance. Therefore, much drink may be said to be an equivocator with lechery. It makes him and it mars him. It sets him up and it takes him off. It persuades him and it disheartens him. It makes him stand to and not stand to. So he's making kind of like a seedy reference there to sort of sexual conduct and, the influence that drink can have on that. In conclusion, equivocates him in his sleep and giving him the lie leaves him. And Macduff says, I believe drink gave you the lie last night. And the porter says, that it did, sir, in the very throat on me. But I am requited him for his lie, and I think being too strong for him. Though he took up my legs and some time, yet I made a shift to cast him. So enters Macduff, having heard this commotion, and Macbeth enters, having heard Macduff at the door. Macduff says, "Is thy master stirring?" "Our knocking has wakened him. Here he comes." Lennox says to Macbeth, "Good morrow, noble sir." Macbeth, "Good morrow, both." Macduff asks, "Is the king stirring, worthy Thane?" Macbeth, "Not yet." Macduff explains, "He did command me to call timely on him, and I have almost slipped the hour." Macbeth says, "Well, I'll bring you to him." So he's completely acting here, totally innocent in this moment. "Oh yes, I'll bring you to the king's chamber now." Macduff says, "I know this is a joyful trouble for you, but yet 'tis one." So he's saying, "Oh, this is an awful lot of trouble you're having to go through, but it is a joyful trouble, right?" And Macbeth agrees. "The labour we delight in physics pain." This is the door. Macduff says, "I'll make so bold to call, for 'tis my limited service," and he exits. So he goes in, as is his job, he goes in to wake the king. And Lennox asks, "Goes the king hence today?" he asks of Macbeth. And Macbeth says, "Aye, he did appoint so, yeah, as far as I know, he planned to." And here we have a nice reference from Lennox to the disruption of the night before. Plenty of pathetic fallacy here. Lots and lots of references to unruly weather and even just geography in general. And we're going to see, because Scotland is going to be torn apart by the fact that this king has been killed and everything is just completely dishevelled and the axis has kind of been turned on its side. So Lennox says, "The night has been unruly. Where we lay, our chimneys were blown down, and as they say, lamentings heard in the air, strange screams of death, prophesying with ancient accents terrible, of dire combustion and confused events, new hatched to the woeful time. The obscure bird clamoured the livelong night." So the obscure bird is associated with death. So she clamoured the entire night long. So the birds, nature, the chimneys, they're screaming on the wind. Everything is very eerie, very superstitious, very uneasy and unsettled. Some say the earth was feverish and did shake. So even geographically, the land of Scotland is having a convulsion and having a convulsive reaction to the murder of the king. Even though nobody knows yet that the king is dead, this is a physical reaction that the land is having to the death. Macbeth says, "Oh, it was a rough night." Lennox, "My young remembrance cannot parallel a fellow of it. I can't remember anything like it." Enters Macduff, and of course now he has seen the murder. "Oh, horror. Tongue nor heart can conceive nor name thee." Macbeth and Lennox, "What's the matter?" "Confusion," this is Macduff, "confusion now hath made his masterpiece. Most sacrilegious murder hath broke ope the Lord's anointed temple and stole thence the life of the building." So very important for underlining here, confusion has made its masterpiece. So this is a masterpiece of confusion. Holy sacrilegious. So highlight that. Sacrilegious murder has broken open the Lord's anointed temple. So the Lord is disgusted. Everything is completely on its axis, and the life of the building has been stolen. Macbeth, "What's this you say, the life?" Lennox, "What do you mean?" "His Majesty," Macduff says, "approach the chamber and destroy thy sight with a new Gorgon. Do not bid me speak, see, and then speak yourselves." So exeunt Macbeth and Lennox. And Macduff goes about now waking the entire household, including Donalbain and Malcolm, the sons of the king. "Awake, ring the alarm bell, murder and treason, Banquo and Donalbain, Malcolm, awake. Shake off this downy sleep, death's counterfeit, and look on death itself. Up, and see the great doom's image, Malcolm, Banquo. And from your graves rise up and walk like sprites to countenance this horror. Ring the bell." So the bell rings, and now enters Lady Macbeth, fresh from sleep, completely ignorant of anything that's happened. "What's this business? That such a hideous trumpet calls to parley the sleepers of this house? Speak. Macduff says, and this is with great irony, "Oh, great lady, 'tis not for you to hear what I can speak. The repetition in a woman's ear would murder as it fell." Which is great irony, of course, because she has been the chief orchestrator of this horrendous deed. But he's, the reference to the genders as well, that a lady would be too sweet and too innocent and too unable to take this on. Enters Banquo. "Oh, Banquo, Banquo, our royal master is murdered." And Lady Macbeth says, "Woe, alas, what, in our house?" So she's really playing the two-faced figure there and acting like, this is all a big surprise to her. And you'll recall from Act 1 when she says to Macbeth, "Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent underneath." So this kind of like show she's putting on. And Banquo, "Too cruel anywhere, dear Duff, I prithee contradict thyself and say it is not so." Enters Macbeth and Lennox. Macbeth says, "Had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. For from this instant there's nothing serious in mortality. All is but toys, renown and grace is dead. The wine of life is drawn, and mere lees is left this vault to brag of." So if I had died before this moment, I would have had a happy life. Everything good is gone. The wine of life is drawn. Everything is useless and deathless and dead now. Enter Malcolm and Donalbain, of course the ones with the most to lose here, their father. Donalbain, "What is amiss?" Macbeth, "You are, and do not know it. The spring, the head, the fountain of your blood is stopped, and the very source of it is stopped." Macduff says, your royal father has been murdered." Malcolm, "By whom?" Lennox, "Those of his chamber, as it seemed, have done it. Their hands and faces were all badged with blood, so were their daggers, which unwiped we found upon their pillows. They stared and were distracted. No man's life was to be trusted with them." So the Chamberlains are being firmly blamed for this, and their blood was all over the blood of the king was all over their hands and their pillows. They were very badly smeared with the blood, or the filthy witness. And Macbeth says, "Oh, I do repent me of my fury that I did kill them." Wow. So Macbeth in that moment just says, "Oh, I'm really sorry, but I killed them. In instinct I killed them. I killed the guards." This was not planned. They were supposed to take the rap for the murder, to be maybe put on trial or to be questioned or whatever. But certainly Lady Macbeth did not make this plan, of killing these men with her husband. He just frantically and randomly did it. Macduff says, "Wherefore did you do that? Like, why did you do that? Like, there were many other avenues we could have pursued. They could have been questioned, tortured, anything, but why murder them without question?" Macbeth says, "Who can be wise? Amazed, temperate and furious, loyal and neutral in a moment." So it was impossible for me to control my emotions at this moment. I was too furious, and I was loyal, and I couldn't be neutral. "No man, the expedition of my violent love outrun the pauser. Reason just got the better of me, and my violent affection for Duncan was overrun. Here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with his golden blood, and his gashed stabs looked like a breach in nature for ruin's wasteful entrance." So his silver skin, his royal blood, all this regal language, and his gashes were like against nature, which is another important theme that runs through the play. There the murderers steeped in the colours of their trade, their daggers unmannerly breached with gore. Important quote for highlighting here. Who could refrain that had a heart to love, and in that heart courage to make love known? I couldn't hold back. It was an impulse. It was done out of love, a passionate love, and I killed them. And Lady Macbeth, who knew nothing about this plan to kill she had nothing to do with the killing of the Chamberlains. She was happy to frame them and maybe see them murdered later, but this very instinctive thing that Macbeth has done was not done with her sanction. And this was important for, let's say, the power balance between the pair of them, because he has actually acted solely in this. He's gone rogue, actually. And Lady Macbeth faints. "Help me, ho." Macduff says, "Look to the lady." Malcolm asides to Donalbain, "What should we do, hold our tongues? That most may claim this argument for hours?" And Donalbain says, aside to Malcolm, "What should be spoken here? where our fate hid in the auger hole may rush and seize us. Let's away, our tears are not yet brewed. And Malcolm says, nor our strong sorrow upon the foot of motion. So there's this idea suddenly the boys are quite alarmed. Everybody's tending to Lady Macbeth, who has fainted. But the boys are very alarmed. Other than the fact that they are plunged into a deep grief, they are also very concerned for their own safety at this moment. Rightly so. They're the heirs to the throne. Maybe if it wasn't the Chamberlains, maybe they are still in, maybe their lives are in peril. Banquo says, look to the lady. So this is important, okay? Lady Macbeth has fainted, and critics are divided to this day over why she faints. Does she faint because at this moment Macbeth's getting a bit of heat? You know, Macduff is asking, well, why did you kill those men without due process? Like, we could have shaken them up for some information. Maybe they were rebels. I mean, God knows what, but we'll never know now because you've killed them. So there's a lot of heat on Macbeth at this moment. But equally, she could have fainted because this was not part of their plan. And the fact that Macbeth has gone ahead and acted in this very independent way could be quite shocking to her. So it's an ambiguous fainting spell, and it's interesting, and it's worthy of exploration. And in an essay you can talk about both sides of that. Banquo says, look to the lady. So let's mind Lady Macbeth, who's just fainted. She exits being helped. And when we have our naked frailties hid that suffer in exposure, let us meet and question this most bloody piece of work to know it further. So tend to the lady, and then when we've all had a few moments to compose ourselves and, you know, get ourselves together, we can meet again and discuss this. Fears and scruples shake us. In the great hand of God I stand, and thence against the undivulged pretense I fight of treasonous malice. So this horrendous act of evil and betrayal we need to get to the bottom of, but we need a few minutes. Macduff says, and so do I, and all. So Macbeth suggests, let's briefly put on our manly readiness and meet in the hall together. And all of them say, well contended. So that's what they're going to do. They're going to take a few minutes to compose themselves, and they're going to meet again in the great hall. Exit all but Malcolm and Donalbain. Malcolm says, what will you do? Let's not consort with them. So I don't think we should go to that meeting. I think we, in fact, could be gravely in danger. So they don't necessarily believe that the Chamberlains were fully guilty. So if they weren't, then maybe it's Macbeth or it's somebody, but they certainly don't feel very safe right now. What will you do? Let's not consort with them. And Malcolm says something very telling here for underlining. To show an unfelt sorrow is an office which the false man does easy. So it's easy to look, you know, sorry and to show sorrow, but it's a very easy thing for a two-faced person to do. So it's important because he's actually been nominated, or he's been named a successor by his father before him. And it's important to say, you know, even as a young man, he can tell when someone is being two-faced, or he's more of a sense of when someone is being two-faced. Unlike his father before him, who said of the Thane of Cawdor, he was a gentleman on whom I placed an absolute trust. So already Malcolm is maybe showing some of the king-becoming graces that his father maybe was lacking. He has a clearer idea of when somebody is being two-faced. And I suppose now is a good time to acknowledge the irony of the statement when, you know, in the first scene, Duncan says, when he nominates Macbeth as the new Thane of Cawdor, he says, no more the Thane of Cawdor shall deceive my bosom interest. But of course, he's gone ahead and deceived his bosom interest. He's actually murdered him. So it's important just to kind of point out the irony of that statement. But already Malcolm may be indicating that he could be a better king than his father, at least be a more discerning king than his father had been previous. And the fact that the two of them are now saying they need to get out of there because their lives are not safe is important. So Malcolm says, I'll to England, and Donalbain, to Ireland I. Our separated fortunes shall keep us both safer. Where we are, and important here, Donalbain says, there's daggers in men's smiles. So echoing his brother, it's easy to be two-faced, but there are daggers in men's smiles. This is in Hamlet as well. The near in blood, the nearer bloody. So this idea that, you know, and also remembering as well that Macbeth is a far out kinsman of the boys, of their father. So this suggestion here that maybe they think it is Macbeth, the near in blood, the nearer bloody. Malcolm says, this murderous shaft that's shot hath not yet lighted, and our safest way is to avoid the aim. So we need to get out of the way of the cannon or the gun or whatever. Therefore to horse, and let us not be dainty of leave taking, but shift away. So let's not be dainty. Let's not, you know, stay and thank the Queen, or sorry, thank Lady Macbeth for her generosity. We just need to get out of here. There's warrant in that theft which steals itself when there's no mercy left. So the two boys are going to sneak away. They feel that their lives are in peril and they need to get out of there. So Malcolm's going to England and Donalbain is going to Ireland. So just to recap the scene, it begins with a little bit of comic relief, which is a very important dramatic tool that is used in many Shakespearean plays. Then we have the discovery of the murder by Macduff. It's very important that it's Macduff that does that. You're going to see why later on in the story. But he, from the very beginning, questions Macduff's very rash murder of the Chamberlains. Very importantly, Lady Macbeth faints, and we're not completely sure why. Is she trying to defuse the situation? Or is she genuinely shocked at what her husband has managed to do? We also have Banquo there, who is the witness, of course, to the witches and maybe starting to, you know, suspect a little bit of foul play. And we have the two boys then escaping for their lives to grieve separately in two different countries because they do not feel that they can trust where they are staying.